YouTube, welcome back. Today we have a quick video. We will talk about what is a RESTful API. A RESTful API is an interface that two computer systems use to exchange information and securely over the internet. And most business applications have to communicate with each other internally, and third-party applications to perform various tasks. For example, to guarantee monthly pay slips, or your internally account system has to share data with your customers' banking system to automate invoicing and communicate with an internal timesheet application. RESTful API supports this information exchange because they follow a secure, reliable, and efficient software communication standard. So, to make it in other words, let's say that we have this one. Let's say that this is. Let's make it small. Let's say that we have a server or a client, and this server wanna connect with other server. Okay. So in this time, we have a client that wanna connect with other server. So basically, what happened here that we use the RESTful API. Like, we connect here with the RESTful API, and the server sends a request to the other server. Let's call this a client. Let's just call it server. It will be, let's call it a client. And the server will send a response back to the client. Basically, the API is called application. The API is an application program interfaces, and it defines the rules that you must follow to communicate with other software system, with other software systems. And developers expose or create APIs that other applications can communicate with their applications programmatically. For example, the timesheet application exposes an API that asks for employees' forename and a range of dates. For example, maybe API will ask for order status in Amazon. And we have two things. We have client and resources, and this is a client. And here the client are users who want to access information from the web. The client can be a person or a software system that uses the API. For example, developers can write a program that access weather data from a weather system, or you can access the same data from your browser by yourself. And we have the resource here. The resource are the information that different application provider to their clients. Resources can be images, videos, text, numbers, or any type of data. And the resources are being provided from the server. Maybe the server is connected with like a database or something, and it just asks and query data from the database and write the data to the database, and the database send it back. So this is what is the API. But what is REST? The REST is a representational state transfer. And it is a software architecture that imposes conditions on how an API should work. REST was initially created as a guideline to manage communication on complex network like the internet. You can use REST-based architecture to support high-performing and reliable communication at scale. You can easily implement and modify it, bringing visibility to cross-platform probability to any API system. And the REST has some four major components, or the following. We have some principles that we should work with REST. First, we have something called, okay, this is too big. First, we have something called, let's make it with numbers, I guess, yeah. First, we have something called uniform interface. And the uniform interface is a fundamental to the design of any RESTful web service. It indicates that the server transfer information in a standard format. The format resource is called representation is in REST. This format can be different from the internal representation of the resource on the server application. So a uniform interface imposes four architecture constraints. First, the first thing, let's just delete and let's add a new text here. So I don't want to make it and add a new text here. So let's make it 1. So first we have the request request should identify resources like they do by using a uniform resource identifier. So for example, like at product or something like that, it should identify something like that. Second, clients have enough information in the resource representation to modify or delete the resource if they wanted. The server meets the condition by sending metadata that describe the resource further. Third, the clients receive information about the process representation further. And fourth, the client receive information about all other related resources they need to complete a task. The second thing that we want to talk about, which will be let me just put it like that. The second thing that I want to talk about, that we have a stateless. It should be stateless. So in RESTful architecture, stateless refers to a communication method in which the server completes every client requests without like independently of all previous requests. Like clients can request resources in any order, and every request is stateless or isolated from other requests, and this is more secure and more reliable. After that, we have a layered system. And in layered system architecture, the client can connect to other authorized intermediates between the client and server, and it will receive a response from the server. And we have a fourth, which is cacheable. RESTful web service cacheability. Okay, so basically here, RESTful web service supporting caching, which is a process of sorting some responses on the client or on an intermediate to improve server response and reduce the latency. Fifth, we have something called the code on demand. And code on demand in RESTful architecture style servers can temporarily extend or customize client functionality by transferring software programming code to the client. For example, when you will fill a registration form on any website, your web browser immediately highlights any mistakes you make, such as incorrect phone numbers. It can do this because of the code sent by the server. And this is all the principles of the RESTful API. We want to talk about what is the benefits from these principles. The benefits will be three things. First, we have scalability. The systems that implement RESTful API can scale efficiently because REST optimize the client server integrations. Stateless removes server load balance. The server does not have to retain past the client request information at all. We have a flexibility. RESTful web servers supports total client server separation. We have the intermittency. The RESTful are intermittence of technology used. You can write both client and server applications in various programming languages. The other thing that we want to talk about, how the RESTful API works. So let's just go here, upstairs here, and let's talk about how the RESTful API works. First of all, the client. Let me delete all of that. And let me delete that also. Okay, so if we talk about it, okay, so first the client sends the requests the request to the server, the client follows the API documentation to format the request in a way that the server understands. So for example, the client wanna get the product. So maybe the client will send the requests and will use API rules, and maybe it will go with the API. For example, would go with the URL or like unique resource identifier will be like a users or something. Users or user. My right with the pen is not good. Second, the server authenticates the client and confirms that the client has the right to make the request. So first, the server will take the requests and will just try to authenticate it and know if it has the request or not, or have the right to access this data or not. The third, the server receive the request and process it internally. Maybe the client will the user, so the server will reach out to a user database and will get the data back. And fourth, the server will return the response to the client. The response contains information that tells the clients whether the request was successfully or the request was failed, and the response also includes any information that the client has requested. So it will send back the users. So this is how it works. And what does the RESTful API request contain? Because the client will send the request, but what this request contains. So let's just talk about this one. So the request contains, first we have something called a unique resource identifier. Unique resource identifier, which is URL or URI, or like so uniform resource locator URL. So for here we have, for example, the server identifies each resource with unique resource identifiers. For REST services, the server typically performs resource identifications by using a unique resource locator like a URL. For example, we want to access a user, we will get like a user, like something like this is a URL, like, but it will be, we'll put like HTTP, and we like HTTP / for example localhost 8000, and this will be called the path name, which is the unique identifier for the user resource. The second, we have something called a method, and in the method we have mainly four methods. We have the get, which is responsible to clients get to access resources that are located at the specified URL. We have post, which this one the clients use post to send data to the server and create them. We have put, and put use it to update data in the system or the database. And we have delete, which would to delete a resource. And we have something called an HTTP headers. And HTTP headers, request headers, are the metadata exchange between the client and server. For instance, the request header indicates the format of the request, like a JSON response.json, or also we put the authentication token there, like X token. Basically, the HTTP headers gives you an information, gives the server an information of what should be expected from the request. We have last thing, something called data, and the data REST API request might include data for the post or put, and we store them in the body. We send them in the body. For example, if I want to create a post, that I should provide a text for this post to be able to create it. We have something called also a parameters, and the parameters RESTful API request can include parameters that give the server more details about the needs to be done. The following are some different types of parameters. For example, we have like something like called path, and path parameters that specify URL details. We have query parameters that request more information about the resources. We have cookie parameters that authenticate client quickly. And we want to talk about what also we have the RESTful API authentication methods, which will be which we'll talk about the HTTP authentication, and the HTTP defines some authentication schemas that you can use directly. For example, we have a basic authentication, we have a bearer authentication, we have API keys, and we have OAuth. OAuth is the most famous one, and we could make videos about that in the future. And basically, we're gonna talk about what does the RESTful API server response will contain. The server response will contain. Let's just create a new text here to talk about that. So the server, first we have a status, and the status is like a 200, which is like generic success. We have a 201 post method success. We have 400, which will be incorrect request that the server cannot resource, and we have 404, the resource cannot found, or the URL cannot found. We have 500, which is the internal server error. We have something called a message.body, and the message body is the response body contains the resource representational, like the server selects an appropriate representation format based on what the request headers contain. For example, the clients can request format in XML or JSON formats, which defines how the data is written in plain text. For example, it will be like the body could be like an object, a JSON object that has like a name called Mo, for example. We have something else called headers, and the headers, the response also contains the headers for metadata about the response. They give more context about the response and include information such as the server, encoding data, and content type. And yeah, that's it for the RESTful API, and I hope my description was quite good. If you like my content, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you will never miss a video, and see you guys in future problems.